Well, Ben just stopped. Welcome, everyone, to Friday 15. My name is Brian Beck. I'm here with Andy Hoare. You know, Andy, sometimes I forget to hit a button there, and it doesn't fade in and out. Anyway,
Brian,
welcome.
you got to pay him too. That's the other thing.
Well,
I told you got to pay him.
I know. Well, they're on a payment plan. I guess they didn't like it too much. Anyhow, welcome everyone to Friday 15. We got an exciting session today. We're talking all about IT and e-commerce. We'll get to that in just a minute. But of course, before we get into all that, Andy, we got to do our breaking news. All right, folks. So did you see this, Andy? U.S. companies are still slashing jobs to reverse pandemic hiring boom. This is a story in the Wall Street Journal, came out this week. It talked about a longer-term trend, Andy, regarding basically companies laying off people and replacing them with automation and other things. You know, this is not just a new thing post-pandemic, not just AI. This has been happening for a very long time, right? And as we look over the course of history, this is a data point you found. This is fascinating. Microsoft is worth 10 times more versus IBM, but employs about half as many employees as IBM did in 1985. So if you look at Microsoft today, with a higher market capital, much higher market capitalization, this is adjusted for inflation, they have half as many employees as IBM did. What do you make of this? That's incredible.
Yeah, you know, it says a lot about IBM and about Microsoft. Two different stories, but the IBM story, I looked the data up today. If you bring that graphic back up for a second, if you look at where they are today,
yep,
they would have moved straight sideways. They have 270,000 employees and a $250 billion market cap. So they've gone absolutely sideways, not up.
Right.
So they still haven't learned the lesson. That's the IBM story. The Microsoft story, along with Alphabet, Apple, Nvidia, et cetera, is that revenue and market cap per employee has exploded. Wow. Now, there's a lot of dimensions to this. Some people would argue that some of these companies are inflated in value. You know, you can make a lot of different arguments, but the reality is that software companies are doing a lot more with fewer people, period.
Wow.
And, you know, it's interesting. There's another story here, though, about Microsoft, because Microsoft is also on this. And in Microsoft in 2000, inflation adjusted is worth about $1.2 trillion. And today it's $3.5 trillion. They have employed about 6 times as many people as they had back then. But that's the story of profitable growth.
Right.
And so, and by the way, they are laying people off as well, which is also worth noting. So all these companies are actually shedding employees. The big story on the first slide, though, about what's going on, it's a mixed picture on jobs, but I think it's worth noting that pretty much all of the employment growth recently has been in the healthcare sector.
Interesting. Really?
If you take healthcare out of this, white collar employment has been flat for many, many months. And I don't think we're going to see a huge change. We know anecdotally, we're talking to a lot of people. We're hearing this, that companies, the net of people who are being let go versus hired is still on net, more people being let go than hired. At least that's been my impression. You?
Yeah, no, I think that's true. And we've done Friday 15s on this in the past, sessions on this, anywhere we talk about, you know, what's happening with the job market, the higher unemployment rate amongst new college graduates. I mean, this is a real, you know, concern for dads like me who have a 14-year-old son, right? Who's, you know, what's his career going to look like, you know, kids coming out of college. So yeah, this is a long-term trend, and I think folks need to be mindful of it. And for those of us who are, you know, further along in our career, obviously things like AI present an advantage and ways to help scale our business. But for the next generation of employees, it's going to be fascinating to see how this plays out.
Well, the takeaway on this one for sure is wherever you are in your career, you have to be very skilled with AI, because AI is like a turbocharger.
Right.
For what you're capable of doing from a productivity perspective. And there's one clear thing. This may be a complicated picture. The clear picture is if you're not using AI, you're going to fall well behind.
Yeah. So, I mean, you and I know we use it. We play with it. We worked with it in the Master B2B universe as well. And it's important to stay on top of it. And we obviously follow the industry. So, well, folks, a couple quick announcements before we bring in our special guest. I want to remind everyone we have our Mindshare Summit coming up in just a few weeks, Andy, in March at the University of Chicago, March 10th and 11th. We still have a couple seats available. Want to make sure people know that. You can go to our website, Master B2B, click on Summit. That's under events, and register to or apply to attend. So that's going to be an exciting one. And then I also wanted to remind folks that we have our forum available for participation by practitioners only. This is not there's no solution providers in there. It's only practitioners. We've got a lot of folks there that are interacting every day and networking in real time, asking questions, et cetera. It's free for practitioners. And then finally, we make our podcast available, Andy, as you know, or our Friday 15 as a podcast through the podcast services like Spotify and Apple. So please go on there and give us a review, please, if you enjoy what you're hearing today. And through our series, we're over 100 episodes now. So lots of great content over the years. So let's get into our topic for today, Andy, which is IT versus e-commerce. Can't we all just get along? This has been something, I've lived this, right? I was a VP of e-commerce for years. And during my career had things I was pushing for, challenges. I wanted to move fast and break things and introduce new features and functionalities. And the IT, the CTO, my peer on the other side would say, "No, Brian, you can't do that. We have to, be careful with our scalability and stability and security and all these other things." And so, the sad fact is, Andy, that only 48% of digital enterprise initiatives meet or exceed business outcomes, the targets, and that's according to Gartner. So, this is a reality where these investments don't work. Almost half of them. And this misalignment thing can be part of the issue, right? IT versus e-commerce, because they have different objectives in many ways, right? And we're going to bring our special guest in here who's got some interesting perspective on that in just a moment. But this is a real conflict, and it's one that I've lived. And if you think about this from an AI perspective, we were just talking about AI. 69% of organizations have evidence that employees are using prohibited AI tools. AI is making this worse, I think. We'll get Andy's perspective in a few minutes, but this is something that is exacerbated by all this new technology. Any initial thoughts on this?
Yeah, I think that this is an age-old issue, right? But the line that you said that was the most important line, which is that sometimes and often these groups have competing objectives. I think that's the fundamental problem. This requires guidance from the top. Yes, everybody has responsibilities. Yes, everybody has a certain set of things they have to deliver. But, and maybe this sounds like a Pollyanna statement, but why can't there be more kind of cohesion amongst these groups? Because ultimately, if every team, if you work against one another, it's not going to, you look at a football team, everybody has a different role on the team, but ultimately the job is to score, right?
Right.
Why isn't that more pervasive in companies? And I think that's the fundamental problem. Now, we're going to hear from our special guest that he's probably solved this problem because he has an interesting role in his company.
Yes,
but we still see this tension. We hear it all the time. The digital people say, hey, we had to go to the CIO or the CFO or whatever and make our case for investment. It's like, okay, great. Making the case for investment is one thing, but assuming that you're competing with multiple other projects and you may not get your funding because somebody else has another project they have a pet, interest in is ridiculous.
Right. So the good news is, Andy, there is hope, right? So McKinsey came out with this report this week. In a February 2026 report, McKinsey found that half of top performing companies, so the companies that are exceeding their peers in terms of results, use a co-creation strategy across technology and business teams. And that's double where they were just 3 years ago. So this is essentially showing that when those two teams, IT and business, work together, e-commerce and business, that the results on the business overall, to your point, are superior. So there's a real benefit to this. And today we want to bring on a very special guest who can talk about this directly, Mr. Andy Goodfellow, here talking to us from the looks like the capital of the universe there, sitting atop. And those of you who can't see, Andy's in his office overlooking the entire city of, I believe that's Chicago. Andy, is that correct?
Yep.
Yes. Awesome. Well, Andy, Sweet G Goodfellow that's his boxing name, by the way, folks. He was a contender for us in our debates. SVP, Senior Technology Officer, or Chief Technology Officer at Zorro, a tiny little division of Grainger. What, 2 billion, Andy, I think, something like that. Right, almost 2 billion. Tell us about Zorro and your role there, Andy.
Yeah. So I lead the technology teams at Zorro. Zorro's a single channel e-commerce, which is what we're talking about today, right? E-commerce only business. And we currently merchandise millions and millions of SKUs. And like you mentioned, they're a wholly owned subsidiary of Grainger. I think we've existed since around 2010. So
okay.
15 years old.
$2 billion in 15 years. That's pretty awesome.
Yeah.
So Andy, tell us about your role there. I mean, this is close to home, I think, right? This kind of friction between these two functions. Go ahead.
Yeah. So I would say, Zorro actually has a really tight coupling between e-commerce and IT. And actually, we kind of did away with the whole concept of IT probably about 7 or 8 years ago. And we think about it as, essentially part of the business. So the technology organization is, it is a revenue generator, and it's very focused on customer outcomes, like that Gartner quote that you brought up mentioned. So we kind of have a unique, tightly coupled situation with my role in particular, and even my peers too, on how we think about going to market and how we solve problems for our customers and figure out business problems with technology primarily, because we're primarily a technology-driven distributor, I would say.
That's fascinating. So you got rid of IT. That's interesting. So I mean, you still have to have you still have to have sort of stability, security, penetration testing, and all the things that are compatibility of systems architecture, all those things that a CIO would traditionally or typically manage. That still exists, right? That doesn't go away. No, it doesn't go away. The way I would say we think about it is like from a mindset shift perspective, right? So if we think about IT, that tends to invoke a lot of what you mentioned, right? Risk mitigation, cost controls. Yeah. Less about creating value for a customer, right? And more about protecting the company. And if you think about e-commerce, right, that's all about creating value and generating, business, new business and repeat business and things like that. So when we think about technology, we want to think about it through the lens of creating customer value instead of, just mitigating risk. Now we still have to do that, to your point, but just the mindset around, as a technology organization, are we talking about, velocity and mean time to resolution and that kind of stuff? Or are we talking about, creating value, gaining leverage, and more kind of business conversations? We tend to focus more towards, table stakes. The table stakes are the risk mitigation and security. Those have to be there. But what we really are after is, gaining share and building leverage for our business and helping our customers. So it's I'd say we didn't do away technically with IT, to your point, but what we did was we shifted our mindset around where we tend to focus.
So Andy, question for you. How does this work from a practical perspective? So you said you did away with this. Interesting enough, your title is still Chief Technology Officer. So there's definitely a technology component here, right?
Yeah.
But is technology embedded in the business teams? Do the business teams come to you as a technology advisor? Like, how does this work from a practical perspective? Let's say I discovered a new AI tool that is a marketing tool, for example, and it's going to help us, do better targeting with our email outreach. How does this work? Do they go to their embedded technology person who knows marketing technology? Do they come to you for an opinion? How's it work?
Yeah, so I would actually inverse it, kind of the way you described it, Andy. We try from a technology perspective to think enterprise wide, right? So when we think about solutions for the business, for the broader business, for our other employees, we tend to think about it through an enterprise lens and not through maybe an insular, IT lens and what we need to do just to protect our systems. We think about, how can we serve marketing? How can we serve customer fulfillment? How can we serve category management? And then we form our teams around kind of those type of mappings, if you will. I wouldn't say we embed IT, like we have embedded technologists in some of the like in our pricing teams. We have data scientists in our pricing teams. They report to the pricing leader. They don't report to the technology. Now we have data scientists in the technology team too that work on different things, but we all work very closely together. We all use the same tools. All the initiatives go through, essentially a peer-reviewed process that the C-suite approves. So we know that we're mapping to our objectives correctly in the work that we're choosing to do and in the work we're choosing not to do. So we kind of think about, like, you mentioned AI. When we started thinking about how we were going to approach AI, we really did it through an enterprise lens. We didn't think about point solutions or how we can specifically use AI in very specific use cases. We thought about how do we educate the entire enterprise with the technology group leading the way, and getting the whole kind of company up to speed on leveraging this kind of technology particularly the AI technology that we're talking about. So I'd say it's a little bit inverse. We don't think about it as, hey, broader business, you need to come to technology and request resources, right? We think about it as we're enabling the business to serve our customer, and so how can we make sure that we're thinking enterprise wide and supporting the broader business.
So if I find something though in marketing, this is part where Brian's going. If I find an AI tool, they're popping up all over the place, and I want to use it, how does that work at Zoro? Do I just start using it? Do I have to come to you and get permission? How does it work?
Yeah, no, well, so we're very agnostic on that. So what I would say is we try to build our systems and have an approach that's very agnostic. So I don't want to get locked into specific models or specific platforms, especially in AI, because those things are changing rapidly, and new ones are coming out all the time that are better maybe than previous models. Yeah. So we try to enable the entire enterprise to be able to use different models, different platforms. Now we have to do that thoughtfully. There is governance, right? There is compliance, and there's things that we say we're not ready to use that thing yet. It's just too new, or we need to go through the correct legal channels. So it's not like it's a free for all, but it does happen. To your point, like we've had people pop up and they've been using some AI platform, and they'll come to the technology group and say, hey, can we get this? Can I use this? And their answer is, okay, let's run it through the right governance process. And we can do that pretty quickly to see whether it's okay for us to. There's still
you got to protect the organization from itself, Andy, right?
It's got guardrails. Yeah, there's definitely guardrails in place, but right. but we're not doing is super isolating to say you could only use this one model. We're building all our stuff so that we can swap.
Yeah, models. That makes sense. So Andy, you're going to be on a CIO panel at our upcoming summit in a month or so, and we're going to be talking about these issues. So we're kind of giving a little bit of a sneak peek here. Yep. Any thoughts for a traditional? A lot of the folks that are going to be at the summit and just in general in our audience are in sort of traditional B2B companies. And I would call Zoro maybe a little bit non-traditional in the sense that you're a pure play. You described it that way. You're part of Grainger, which is a traditional company. But what advice would you have for particularly our business practitioners and CIOs at traditional companies, in terms of dealing with this issue? I mean, how do you, you guys have embedded it. Where do you start? I mean, what's something they can do to try to get alignment, in that kind of a traditional structure?
Well, I think it all boils down to how you're organized, right? So I think like Grainger is a great example of, I think, doing it through a traditional model really well. Like they have their technology leader and their product leader who would probably be responsible for their all their different digital products. Yeah, those two guys are tight knit, right? Like they've formed a really tight relationship, and they purposefully formed what they call a group of essentially two different senior VP led organizations, but they kind of operate as one. Like they have a lot of shared outcomes. They have a lot of shared, town halls or summits. So I think it starts with the senior leadership's kind of behavior towards each other, and whether or not they have a good relationship and they are actually working, hand in hand or separately. Kind of like what you described, Brian, back, your experience. There's a little bit of opposition, right? That's the thing that I think you need to kind of get rid of that, rip that out, and then you can actually move forward together, and then you get the outcomes you're looking for. And then more traditional business.
Yeah, no, that's right. And actually we ended up myself and that CTO are still very good friends, by the way. Which is that's where we ended up. Yeah, go ahead, Andy.
I want to ask Andy a quick question about that. So what advice would you have for IT people about how to accommodate business people more elegantly than, let's say, traditionally they have? We've talked about business people, having their ducks in a row, respecting what IT does. But let's flip it around from an IT perspective. What advice would you have for your colleagues about how to respect what the business is doing?
Well, so my advice that has worked well for me at Zoro, kind of since I started, was you need to think about the customer and kind of be customer obsessed, and don't confuse the customer with stakeholders, right? So I think one of the kind of major, maybe fundamental missteps IT people tend to do is they tend to think of, the marketing analyst as their customer. And it's like, no, like your customer is the guy buying, from the warehouse or whatever is your customer. It's not, that's a stakeholder. That's kind of a partner, right? And so you need to reframe how you think about the people that you're working with in your business, and don't think of them as like, I'm a service organization that serves an internal customer. You exist for the external customer that's actually making your business exist, not for the internal. So if you start thinking about, hey, what's the best thing for my actual customer? How do I partner with, my different business people? Because we're both trying to serve our customer. I think you get the right outcomes if you think about it that way and don't confuse the customer.
That's very Amazonian of you, Andy.
It's very unusual. Very
Yeah.
unusual, by the way.
It
And
is.
companies I've worked in, I've had IT people refer to me as the customer.
Yeah.
You're my client. And
Right.
what you just said, Andy, is that's wrong. And you're right about that.
I like that. That's
And
a
we
great
still make that mistake. Like I've been kind of preaching that mantra for 8 years now at Zorro, and I'll still hear people here and there say it. It's easy for IT folks to fall into that a little bit. And so you just have to keep beating the drum and, making sure that they're focused on the actual customer.
All right, let's get your reaction to this question, Mr. Goodfellow, Mr. Sweet G. We asked, and I'm not going to tell you the answer yet. We asked our LinkedIn community: Has the rise of AI made the tension worse between IT and e-commerce teams at your organization? What say you, sir?
No, well, not at Zorro, definitely not. No. It's actually helped us a ton, I'd say.
How about in general? What do you think?
I think probably in general, maybe at less tech-enabled businesses, it probably has, because AI helps folks really accelerate and become higher impact in their job, and so they'll tend to go after that, and essentially bypass IT.
Well, I think the community agrees with your latter statement. Yes, 72% said the tension is worse now that AI is in the mix, and you saw that stat earlier. 69% of people using prohibited AI, whatever that is.
Yeah, there's still this Department of No philosophy out
That's
there,
right.
in more traditional companies, and they got to get over that. Yeah.
But I get it. Like if I'm a business person and suddenly I'm working double the level I was before and having way more impact, and then somebody comes and tells me I can't use that tool anymore, that would be super frustrating.
Yeah.
So I get how that would create a lot of tension for sure.
Well, Sweet G, we're going to see you at our summit in just a few weeks in March at the University of Chicago. We look forward to that. Thank you for being such an active and awesome part of our community. We appreciate you, and thanks for your time and comments today.
Yeah, thanks for having me, guys. I appreciate it.
Awesome. So, Andy, just one more quick announcement before we wrap our Friday 15. Want to remind folks that our Master B2B Nexus is available to everyone through our website. It is a paid service. It is on-demand expert advice exclusively for B2B e-commerce practitioners. Again, paid service, but it's something that's driving a lot of value for our members of Nexus. Andy, any final words, Andy Hoare, before we wrap for the day? I thought Andy G was awesome.
Yeah, I think Andy G shows what an evolved kind of relationship here can look like for IT and business. And you know what? I think that AI is an excuse, a good one, to throw the chessboard up in the air, let the pieces fall, and rethink this. Because you were showing that graphic, and I was thinking there needs to be a rethinking where those two guys are like in opposition to one another. Yeah. As Andy G pointed out, we've got to dispense with that, because again, if we're all on the same team, we should be moving forward. But that requires senior leadership, CEO level leadership. And I'm not sure we've gotten to the point where a lot of those CEOs see a world different from that.
Yeah. Well, I think we're getting there slowly, Andy. It's B2B. So can't we all just get along, folks? And we will see you next week on our next Friday 15. Thanks, everybody, for joining us. Don't forget to sign up for the summit.